Okay, so it's been a bit since the last episode. I will admit that. Oops. Sorry about that. I don't intentionally mean to take breaks like that when it comes to my schedules. In this case, it was definitely a matter of I was trying to avoid burnout, I guess. That was definitely something I was doing on YouTube, but it was also a matter of I could barely find a lot of time to be able to pull that off, to be able to make the podcast. So for that, I do apologize. I want to be able to do podcasts every single week. It's hard to say if that'll actually happen, but I'll be able to do podcasts a bit more often than the about month-long break that we had. So without further ado, we've got a couple of things to talk about today, including a dunk on Spotify later on in the episode. But I also want to talk about the stupidity of the Ghost lawsuit that's going on and what can actually happen for social distancing concerts. Is that even possible? Well, let's not waste much more time and let's get straight into it.
You're listening to MRP, the Metal Robot Podcast.
Okay, this particular podcast topic is going to be a bit on the fly. There's no real plan or anything like that. Nothing scripted out. There's no bullet points that I want to hit. I'm just kind of talking off the cuff, which I think is what a podcast is kind of supposed to do anyways. But when your experience with podcasting and recording is rooted in radio broadcasting, normally bullet points are what I try to go off of, because that's usually what most broadcasters on the radio and even on TV, they have a sort of script of some kind to hit while they're talking on the radio or again on TV. In this case, I don't, because this one I kind of just found on the fly, and I'm just so confused by this whole thing as to why it's happening. So if you weren't aware, Ghost, the band, they are currently suing a British vodka company called Ghost. What? No, seriously, that's actually happening, and it's not, as Metal Sucks actually pointed out, it's not like a confusing thing where Metallica had no idea that their lawyers went after a Canadian cover band. That was a real thing. That was actually, if you have the chance, look into that. It's pretty funny when that actually happened. They almost accidentally sued. That would have been horrible. But on the bright side, free press, I guess. Anyways, so yeah, if you weren't already aware, Ghost the band is suing Ghost Vodka because of the fact that Ghost the band has their own alcoholic brand. And the lawsuit isn't really in regards to the fact that two people named Ghost are selling a vodka. It's because they're both named Ghost. So Ghost the band is suing Ghost Vodka because of the name itself, Ghost. Because if we're going into it, Ghost BC, or I guess just Ghost now. Is it Ghost or Ghost BC? I'd have no freaking clue. But Ghost is suing because of the fact that the band apparently own a trademark for use throughout all of Europe on all alcoholic beverages because of the fact that they are currently selling gin on the alcoholic market. That's it. But my question is, looking further into this, I am so confused as... are there really any legal basis for this? Well, apparently there is a little bit, as, name brands can definitely become a bit of an issue when you're thinking, I want Ghost alcohol. Just Ghost alcohol. Most people aren't going to go Ghost vodka or Ghost gin, so they want to go for Ghost. Well, there's two Ghosts on the market, technically. The problem is for a couple things, and this is something that I was finding when I was looking further into this, because this is just the pinnacle of what the hell is wrong with everybody involved. Ghost Vodka, I did my research, and they actually started up back in 2010, which is not too long ago, about 10 years ago, and it's not too shabby. They've been around for quite a bit. Ghost, the band, known as, okay, actually, I just looked it up. Ghost BC was the former name. Sorry, going back a bit. This is why I script everything out. But anyways, Ghost, the band, they started back in 2006, not officially releasing anything until about 2010, I believe. And even then, they didn't get into the gin market until 2019. So what is exactly the problem here? Oh yeah, timing. How is that even possible? How is this even a thing? Ghost, the band, didn't even release their Juniper Gin. Not even kidding, that's its actual name. You can tell it's theirs because the logo. They didn't release it until about 2019. But Ghost Vodka have been around since 2010. I'm sensing a slight miscalculation in this lawsuit. Oh my god. Look, I get it. You own the trademark, but the problem is, actually, here's a real question. If they own the trademark, how the hell did they get the trademark? Is it just because Tobias Forge, his band is named Ghost? How did they get the trademark for Ghost in terms of alcohol when Ghost Vodka has been around longer than they've actually been releasing music? I am so confused by this. I have no real... what? This is so confusing. I'm a loss for words. Ghost, Tobias, why? What is the major malfunction here that you're not cluing into? You own the trademark? Okay, well, boo fucking who? Ghost Vodka was around longer than you. Okay. Ugh. This is why I go on script. Okay, here's the thing. Ghost Vodka is not a particular alcohol I've consumed before. I don't know if it's any good, but I do know at the very least is that Juniper Gin only has 1 star on Master of Malt. It's 1 review, but still 1 star. Yikes. What I will say is that, again, Ghost the band, I like their music. I want to root for them here as a fan of their stuff, but this is just too fucking stupid. Like, there is no real, to me at least, there's no proper basis for this lawsuit. It doesn't make any sense when you look at the timeline of everything involved. But I don't know. Like, I do, at this point, I want Ghost Vodka to be able to win this lawsuit and give Tobias Forge a real kick in the ass, because there's just something severely wrong with Tobias if this is sincerely his thought process. That's what I'm thinking, at least. I don't know. This is off the cuff and makes no sense, but I'll leave it to you. What do you think about this? Tweet to me, actually, what you think about this at the Metal Robot on Twitter. Let me know what you personally think about all this, and yeah, I'm just stumped. Just what? Just what the hell?
You're listening to MRP, the Metal Robot Podcast.
So as of recording this, it's about May 21st of 2020. So we've been stuck in lockdown for the past couple months. It's definitely been a very interesting time. I mean, 2 months since I got a haircut. Oh God, no! Okay, I'm not too mad about it. I mean, I look like Boris Johnson if he was an orangutan thrown in the dryer, but I look totally fine. I'm okay with it. As long as I'm keeping people safe from not going outside too much, I'm okay with it. What I do hope eventually will happen, though, is that we do eventually open up. Safely, of course. I do want to make sure that we're all going to be safe when we open up, but eventually I do want to open up. Not just for a haircut, but because I miss going to concerts, as I'm sure many of you also do. It's something that every single one of us can at least relate to, the feeling of going to a live show, the pulse of the speakers. There's the sound of the wailing guitars, the sheer power of the guy who is screaming behind the microphone. If he's not, of course, cupping the mic, at which point your ears get blown out. But what I do hope for eventually is that if we can't go back to concerts properly soon, then at least we can come up with a solution to this problem. And many people have found different social distancing concerts ideas, all of which can, it's a bit iffy, but I guess technically possible. We heard not too long ago that there was an idea of like a sort of drive-in concert type deal. Like, have you ever been to a drive-in theater where you're just late night, you go with your family or your girlfriend and or boyfriend, whatever, and you go to a a movie theater where your movie theater seats is just your car. Those are pretty fun. I've been to drive-in most of my life with family, and I've gone for multiple times with for dates, but it is definitely something that I could never really see a concert working for, because concerts, you're physically reacting to the music. With movies, you can kind of just sit back and watch. Your reactions are more contained to your verbal emotions. With concerts, it's a bit different. Because I'm guessing you've been to a concert. If not, then I'll tell you right now, your reaction is more physical, especially at a metal show. At a metal show, you're more prone to move around. You're more prone to headbang. You're more prone to run around in the mosh pit. Like, stuff like that is very hard to do in your vehicles, although I'm sure some will try to dogpile with your cars. That would be a sight. Sorry, I can't get that image out of my head. But that is something that is going to be a very hard thing to pull off for social distance concerts, for metal especially. But it's definitely possible, not the mosh pit with vehicles, but going to a concert with, like, in your vehicle and watching from your cars. It's not going to be the same experience as actually physically being at the show, but I do feel like this is something that could still kind of work. I don't know if it will for metal as well as other genres. I know if you're going to like a pop concert, or if you're going to like a typical rock or even country concert, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. But that would be a very difficult thing to pull off for metal, because again, you're more physical when you're at a metal show. What I will say, though, is that they have still been testing out social distance concerts to try and get the world back to normalcy, mostly in the US, because, the most infected country on the planet can't learn to sit fucking still. But nonetheless, they are still trying nonetheless. And that can probably go out even further to other countries, preferably ones who are not as infected as the United States. Seriously, guys, what are you doing? But nonetheless, okay, I'm going to push that aside for now. So going into that, there's even more attempts at it. Aside from just, drive-in concerts, there are attempts to pull, like, just having people, instead of standing in the actual, in the actual, like, floor of the concert venue, people, they are setting up chairs. Not even kidding, they're setting up actual chairs for people to sit in. And that is something that is definitely interesting, because I've seen stuff like this before, even before COVID-19 kind of fucked everything over. If you've ever gone to a Kiss concert, for example, the floor has chairs, which I thought was, okay, that's interesting. I don't know why, but they do. Probably because all Kiss fans are in their 50s. I'm sorry if you're a Kiss fan and you're not in your 50s. But that is something that I saw that was very interesting. First of all, like, the chairs are more or less spread apart, and there's not a lot of chairs on the floor. And if you go into the bleachers, where most of the chairs actually already are, there's also not a lot of people there. And most of the people are wearing face masks and gloves. That is something that is very interesting. And that's something that I can definitely see a lot of places going for when they are trying to bring concerts back to their previously locked down countries. The problem is, in my opinion, this is still very much an issue of COVID-19, because you're limiting the amount of people that are allowed in the venue. You're having to block off a number of seats, and that can definitely be a bit of a strain on money for the venue. There's a reason why they have a lot of seats, because the amount of people that go to the concerts, they want to try and fill up as much as possible, because that will mean more profit for the venue. So when you get down to that, it's going to be a bit more difficult to make money at a constant rate. You'd have to host like probably 5 concerts, maybe a little less than that, but at least 5 concerts a day in order to stay open with that kind of work ethic. Something that I guess is better than the alternative of no money whatsoever, but it's definitely something that can still not do well. If anything, you're making money, but you're not making money. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm completely ignorant to this whole situation. I have no idea if this actually is a good idea in terms of profit for the venues to stay open. But I can definitely say that this is still something that musicians, at least, are willing to try to do. There's like the concert I'm talking about, actually, admittedly, is not a metal concert. It's like, from what I can tell, a country concert, I guess. But if you can tell, I'm not a fan of country by much. But they did try it, and it seems like people there were having a good time. They did enjoy themselves, and even the musicians involved had a decent time as well. But this is definitely, I don't know, like this is still a bit weird for me to be able to get behind, because there's so much more that is involved. I mean, yeah, you can think, well, hold on, because there's not a lot of people there. They're restricting the amount of people coming in for the venue, like for the patrons, and then there's the musicians. Okay, that's not a lot. Well, hold on, because that's not counting everybody in the building. There's also the techs, the crew that come with the bands. There's also the workers there who are selling you food, and there's the security guards there. There's the people selling merch. There's a lot of people involved with a single concert. Even the biggest concerts require the most crew. So you're still not exactly going to be social distancing by any means, especially if you are on the crew, because you're constantly running past and interacting with other people in the crew, trying to set up the drums, the guitars, trying to set up the amps, getting the lights set up, getting everything on the stage set up so that the next band can go on. There's a lot going on, especially if you are a smaller band, especially metal, or just smaller band, period. You don't have a crew. You're still taking down your own stuff, which means you're still interacting with the other people, the other bands of the night. It's still better than the large array of crew that you would have, but you're still not really social distancing. My alarm went off. Don't mind that. But that's still very much a problem. And that's a point that I'm actually glad John Oliver hit on when he was talking about sports earlier this week. That is something that, as much as we want to open up the stadiums for sports events again, there is a lot going on. Probably even more so in sports than there is concerts, but it's still the same issue. We cannot properly open up if we are constantly having to deal with the fact that it's very hard to social distance when everybody involved is unable to social distance. There's a lot of problems with that. People were talking about with meat plants, because they're considered an essential business, which I guess, I mean, as someone who likes to eat meat, sure, it's a statement of the food category, so I guess they are very much essential. I don't know how I was describing that, but nonetheless, there you go. But it's still a problem because they are unable to social distance when they're in the factories. Or at the very least, there's not much put in place to protect the workers from getting coronavirus. I mean, if you look at online, you can find many of the workers already have gotten coronavirus, and that's just the beginning of that story. Nonetheless, getting back to music, it's still the same problem. There is no way that we can properly 100% social distance and implement those protocols for concerts or any events at all. Even if you limit the amount of people in the in terms of patrons and music goers and concert goers, and limit the crew, you are still going to have a lot of problems. So, I don't know. Like, as much as I want concerts to come back, I want them to come back safer. I want them to come back so that, in a way that no one is going to be affected. Because if we remember not too long, like back a few months ago, I talked about on A Very Metal Week, my Facebook show where I talk about news, there was a story where a guy got tested positive for the coronavirus, and he had recently attended a Tool concert. That alone is an issue. The fact that he was able to go to the concert, period, and the fact that he was able to, he got tested for coronavirus, and that was a sold-out show, that is very concerning. I mean, yeah, it was a sold-out show, and nowadays we're looking at social distance concerts. That is very much still a same problem. You have no idea if the patrons are going to be positive for coronavirus, especially in the U.S., where, suffice it to say, tests are very hard to come by. I mean, they're hard to come by in most other places, but they are still very hard to come by no matter where you go, especially in the United States. So, I don't know. Like, I very much am not against the idea of looking further into something like this, but I very much don't want concerts to come back until we have a solution to that core problem. How do we have events where people will come and gather while also social distancing? That's a very hard task to put together. It's probably not as hard as some of the hardest jobs in the world, but it's still a very hard task to pull off. One wrong move, and you could spark another wave of coronavirus. We have to be very careful about stuff like this, because otherwise it'll take even longer for us to get back to normal. This is not even really a matter of opinion. This is a matter of many people in terms of experts and people who know much more than I do. This is something that they have all hit on. There is no way that we can open up properly without causing more problems. So we have to be careful here. Look, I want concerts to come back too, but I also don't want to get other people infected. I am willing to wait to go back to concerts, and on top of that, stick with the Boris Johnson haircut that I've got if it means keeping people safe.
You're listening to MRP, the Metal Robot Podcast.
So given the fact that the coronavirus pandemic is still going on, many bands are kind of left in the dust, especially since most bands make their money off of touring, something that obviously is not an essential service. Which, I mean, I would argue against that fact, but for obvious reasons, that would be stupid. But nonetheless, bands are still trying to make their living through online, given that that's the only source of revenue that does respect social distance guidelines for obvious reasons. So, nonetheless, the question has of course come up, can bands survive the coronavirus pandemic? Well, it depends on the band. And also it depends on how they're making their money when touring officially stops. So, a question of course came up, how many Spotify streams are necessary so that bands can live above the poverty line? That is a very good question, and I feel like that's definitely reflective of how much Spotify actually truly cares about about the people that essentially make their business an actual thing. Something I don't think Spotify even realizes, but nonetheless, let's get into that. By the way, if you're listening to this on Spotify, cool! Anyways, let's move on. So going into that, there was an article put out there by James Shotwell, who is the director of customer engagement for Holix, which is actually, if you didn't know, it's a website that I use quite a bit thanks to a lot of the streaming, like a lot of the PR companies that I go through. A lot of them have their own Holix accounts where they will send bands albums and streams to specific people for review, etc., for PR stuff, basically. It's also good for other stuff too, but nonetheless, that's what it's for. If you haven't checked it out yet, definitely do so. So he definitely, he looked into it, and yeah, it's about as depressing as you might think. Looking into it, so I'm going to actually quote what he wrote down. just to give you an idea of what's going on. So the actual quote goes, according to the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, ASPE, the poverty line for single-person households is $11,770. I believe this is pretty much in the U.S. If we ignore how that figure would be hard for anyone to live on in a major city, and most mid-sized cities, we can then round up to 12,000 and use streaming revenue calculators to figure out how many Spotify streams someone would need to sustain themselves. So just to live at least above the poverty line, or at least at the poverty line, they would have to make 3 million plays in total. That's for a year. And again, like the 12,000, that's for a year, like a year's worth of income. So a band would have to have, or any musician would have to have 3 million plays annually to at least get anywhere close. Because at an average payout of $0.006 per song stream, which is way less than a penny, I'm sure you probably caught on to that, it's 2/3 of a penny, basically, that the musician would be getting paid per stream. So 3 million plays is what's needed to at least get anywhere close to living above the poverty line. That is insane. You basically have to be at least somewhat known in order to survive just on Spotify streams, period. Now, obviously, if you're just relying on Spotify streams, you're doing it wrong at that point. And I'm not even just talking about touring. If you're there's other places you should be putting your music up, including especially Bandcamp. Definitely go for that. What I would say, though, is that even then, like Spotify, why? What is the point of that? And especially since we all know how much Spotify actually makes, which actually, you know what? Let me just quickly Google that. Let me just pull that up right now. Spotify net worth, $25 billion. I wonder where most of the other part of the penny is going. Ay caramba, mother. Oh my gosh. That is definitely something that needs to be looked further into, because that should not be anywhere close. And again, 3 million plays, that's just to get to the poverty line. That is just to live at the poverty line. And that's just for you. If you have families, that's even worse, because you would need at least, according to Shotwell's article, at least over 6 million then to at least get somewhere close to 24,250. So that's kind of for like 2 adults and 2 children. You would need that much to even barely support them. That is ridiculous, in my opinion. And again, if you're just making it off Spotify, then you've definitely got to rework that. That kind of mentality. Get your music on more places than just Spotify, Apple Music, especially Bandcamp, because you make 100% of the funds back from that. And on top of that, you can also set up so that people, if they value your product, they can then pay more than what you said. So, for example, if you have music like one song, if you have one song set to $1, if the consumer or the listener really likes what they're hearing, then if they wanted to, they can pay more than that to have a copy of that song. It especially works for albums. So if you have an album set for $10, a fan could pay for that for $20, or maybe even if they really can, $50. Bandcamp, seriously, go for that, especially if you're in metal. That is a huge, thriving community. Go for it. I highly recommend it. Don't just rely on Spotify, because it's very clear, as we all probably guessed, Spotify does not care about you and your problems. They are there to make money off of the people who are doing the real work of creating music for the people. Although I do think someone should probably tell the people at Spotify that without the musicians, they will have nothing. So if they can at least realize that, maybe they'll maybe they will do a turnaround if they can finally figure out where their income is actually coming from. But honestly, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
You just listened to MRP, the Metal Robot Podcast.
Thanks for listening to MRP. You can check us out online, YouTube, Metal Robot Reviews, Facebook, Twitter, @The Metal Robot, Instagram, @The.MetalRobot. You can also check out everything we do on themetalrobot.com for videos, reviews, press, and so much more. Thanks for listening. Click subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the mosh pit next time. Have a good night.